He took that. He took it from her. He took it from me, my husband, my other daughter. I don't want him to get out. In his last parole hearing, he said that he made his daughter knock him off. Guess what? It wasn't me. He can't even remember who his victims are. I can tell you what I do remember, thanks to suppressed memories, and my brother had to confirm it for me. I woke up. I was sleeping in the living room. I woke up to something wet on my toes. I kicked. I didn't know what it was. It was him sucking on my toes.
We are about to watch the parole hearing of a monster, of a roach, of someone who is supposed to be their grandfather and their father. But before we watch that parole hearing, we're going to take a blast to the past to his 2021 hearing. Now we're going to see the good old Mr. O'Shea and Miss Bonnie Jackson interview this monster, and then I'll unpack it with the details at the end.
Would the offender please introduce yourself for the record, stating your name and DOC number?
Stanley T 257873.
Thank you. Let me explain the process to you. First, I will read information into the record, then the board will conduct a parole interview with you. At the appropriate time, we will allow the participants who have indicated to speak to have their input. Real quick, for the support side, we have Mr. Richard Turk, who's a brother who will not be speaking in support. On the opposition side, we have Ms. Alice Hardison from the VAC. We have Ms. Tanny McClellan, the victim's mother, who will be speaking in opposition, and McClellan, who is the victim, who will be speaking in opposition. At the end, you'll be allowed to make a brief statement before the board votes. Do you understand the process, Mr. Turk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is the case for Stanley Charles Turk, POC 257873, classified as a second felony offender, offense and indecent behavior with a juvenile. Sentencing date, March 30th, 2012. Sentenced to 15 years with DOC. Parole date, March 24th, 2022. Good time, not eligible. Full term, March 23rd, 2027. Is this information correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Roche.
Thank you, Mrs. Boholic. Mr. Turk, good morning.
Good morning.
And you have to speak louder because we can hardly hear you, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Turk, you're currently 64 years old, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've been incarcerated for 9 years and 7 months, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were sentenced, a 15-year sentence. 10 years of that sentence was without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension and sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the judge, in his wisdom, said that he was trying to give the victim time to recover. Your victim was 4 years old, a preschooler when you started the abuse. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
That abuse went on until she was approximately 11 or 12 years old. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And at first, your victim, at 4 years old, was not aware anything was wrong because she was a 4-year-old. Grandma married a man who became her pawpaw and thought that individual was one of her protectors. So she didn't think anything was wrong until she was in an attendance at school, and there was a lecture about inappropriate touching. And at that time and place, she realized what you were doing was wrong. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So she had an occasion to go to a camp out of state, and she had bad dreams, nightmares, because she was worried about her sister and her cousins and wondering if you were doing the same thing with them. So she told her counselor told her mother, and that's how you got reported. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Turk, was that the first time you ever abused a family member?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Turk, you're in a official Louisiana State hearing to tell me anything but the truth would be violation of the law. It would be perjury. Will you ever, now I didn't say were you prosecuted and arrested and all that, have you ever abused another family member?
No, sir.
According to my records, you abused your own daughter, and she can verify that. She's here. And your wife at the time, and I'm sorry about her being deceased, but your wife at that time, because you promised to stop drinking and you promised never to touch your daughter again, did not press charges. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But you just told me you've never abused another family member. Let's continue. We know that's not true. So let's continue. Your second felony offender, what was your first felony for?
My first felony?
Yeah,
First felony. DWI.
okay. So you had an alcohol problem, and you promised your wife that you would stop using alcohol. When did you stop, and when did you start again?
I stopped in 89, and I hadn't drank since.
You hadn't drank since. Is that right?
Sir?
You hadn't drank since you stopped in 89?
That's my Friday day.
Okay. You've completed all 4 phases of the sex offender treatment. Tell me what you got from the sex offender treatment.
It opened my eyes to what problems I had. And I'm glad they had the courses here so I could take them, not just only take them, what I could get out of them and just use them in my daily life.
Okay, I also see that you completed Thinking for a Change.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about Thinking for a Change.
Thinking of change made me realize that to think before I act and just take time to, like I said, think it through. And whatever I was going to do is worth doing or not doing, and gave me a choice.
Okay. And I also see that you have a certificate for NAAA at David Wade. Tell me about your NAAA and how long have you been in that particular program?
I took the 12 steps in 2017, and I think the other 3 certificates were like right behind them. 18. I think 3 of them were in 18, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So are you still taking NAAA or attending the meetings?
Right now, they're not having a meeting because of the pandemic.
Okay, so they hadn't started back up yet?
No, no.
Okay. Now, let's talk about substance abuse. Have you taken any substance abuse program?
That's right. I took the 12-step substance abuse and completed it.
Okay. I'm talking about Louisiana Risk Management 1 and 2, the Steve Hall program, Lou Walters, Don Francois. Have you had any, that's education, have you had any substance abuse treatment?
As far as in here, oh, yes, the program stuff, the 12-step program, and attending an NA and AA program.
Okay, okay. Have you had any anger management?
I'm in anger management right now.
Okay, great. How far along are you in anger management?
That class probably started September, October.
Okay, great, great. Have you taken pre-release, 100 hours pre-release?
No,
And lastly, have you taken any victim awareness good time program?
I'm in that now, victim aware.
Good. Excellent, excellent. My record shows that you do not have a GED. You have a high school diploma?
I got GED when I was out on the streets out there. Got that in 90, I think it was 92.
Okay. It's not in your record. It's not in your records. You need to get with classification and get it into your records. Okay? My records show that you don't have a GED. Okay. You have a low static 99, which is very good. You have a low risk assessment, which is very good. What is your job at the facility?
My job,
Yes. What do you do?
I'm on crew 30. Crew 30,
And what does Crew 30 do?
you know, clean up, regularly pick trash up, just keep the air clean and stuff.
Okay. So basically your grounds orderly.
Yes,
Are you a trustee? Well, no, you're not a trustee because of your charge. Okay. Tell me about your transition plan. Where do you plan to live and where do you plan to work?
I'm planning on moving to Panama City, Florida with my brother. And as far as being 64, I'm retired. I have money coming in once a month, but when I get up there, you know, maybe seek employment when I get up there, but just right now,
So you plan to do an interstate compact to Florida.
I have it in the works now.
Great. Outstanding. Now, Mr. Turk, I'm going to be very, very honest with you this morning. Very honest with you. Most parole hearings are about the offender and what the offender has done, his disciplinary record. By the way, you have no disciplinary write-ups for the entire incarceration. Is that still true?
I've never been wrote up.
Yes. Outstanding. No disciplinary write-ups in 9 years and 7 months. Most parole hearings are about your performance while incarcerated, the programs that you've taken, whether or not we see any rehabilitation in the 9 years that you've been incarcerated. And I see all of that. I see all of that this morning. But this hearing is not about only you. This hearing is about the victim. The victim is about 21 years old now. From what I've read a very, very strong young lady. She did not let this over 8-year abuse keep her down. It's affected her, but it hadn't kept her down. She is in the final stages of getting a nursing degree. She's 2 or 3 semesters away from becoming a registered nurse. She's doing her clinicals in the semester 2 that's coming. And this hearing is about Brittany also. It's mostly about Brittany. She's still mentally, physically, and emotionally affected by the extended abuse of what she believed at that time was a person who was supposed to protect her. She couldn't visit her grandmother after she found out what you were doing was wrong. She sort of shied away from even visiting her grandmother in which she loved because she knew what was coming up. She wouldn't stay overnight because she knew even if the grandmother was in a room that you'd find a way. I've read your daughter's letter. I've read it twice. And she states that even though Tiffany is a very strong individual who's not let us, this did not stop her from achieving. But Brittany needs time to finish her degree and get established in life and meet someone and feel comfortable in loving this individual. And she fears that would be in jeopardy if you're ever released. So keep in mind, I'm going to take that in consideration when I make my decision. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Today I see the victims here today. Would like to speak. I'll start off with
Mr. Wise. Mr.
Brittany would
Wise.
like-
Wise. We had Miss Jackson.
Okay.
Questions.
Okay, Miss Jackson, I'm sorry. At
That's
this
okay. I
time,
know
Miss
your
Jackson
screen
has
is
some
limited.
questions.
Good morning, Mr. Turk. Let me start with the positive and commend you for your excellent disciplinary record, your good institutional report, the fact that you've completed all 4 phases of substance abuse treatment, your low risk score, and your participation in the 12-step program. All of those things are wonderful, and I'm glad that you've done those things. But I'll tell you something that I'm really concerned about. When back in May of this year, there was an assessment done regarding your sex offender category, whether you were a predator or those sorts of things. And a lot of information included in that came from you. They talked to you about the situation, they interviewed you, you gave them a statement, and your statement went into their determination of your static 99 score. But that information is only reliable if it's truthful. And one of the things that concerns me greatly is that in May of this year, your statement was, and I'm reading from the report, when discussing the crime in which he is incarcerated for, He admitted acting inappropriately with child by rubbing his hands on her genitals above her pants on one occasion. He denies any other wrongdoing. The incident took place when the victim was 11 and he was 55, and you reported that she was your step granddaughter.
Sure.
So your statement minimizes
Leesville,
the
Louisiana.
extent of your crime against this young lady. You said it only happened once. You said it was outside her clothes. You said she was 11 years old when it happened, and none of that is true. And so it concerns me that as late as May of this year, you still were not being truthful about what you did in this case. You want to speak to that? Why would you make those statements back in May? And what are we to make of that?
About the statement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he asked me what happened, and I explained to him that's what happened.
So when Brittany said you started molesting her when she was 4 years old, and let's be honest, you were originally charged with 6 counts. 6 counts. They allowed you to plead to 1 count. And in May, you told the panel it only happened 1 time. She was 11 years old, and the touching was outside her clothes. And that flies in the face of the police report, what Brittany had to say, what you were charged with. And so it concerns me that you're minimizing, or you're attempting to minimize what you did. You're not taking full responsibility. You're trying to make it seem like it was just one little incident. You didn't really touch her genitals. She was 11 years old. She wasn't 4 years old. And that's concerning to me. Even though you've gone through all 4 phases of sex offender treatment, I'm not certain that that had any real impact on you, because I don't understand why you would make statements about the incident that were not true. When they talked to you, did you mention your pornography addiction?
They didn't ask.
I didn't say whether they asked. I said, did you mention it?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
And did you have a problem with pornography?
Yes, ma'am.
And you had pornography on your computer, is that correct?
Ma'am.
And your wife had to have the computer wiped clean, I think more than 1 time. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the nature of the pornography on your computer?
There wasn't any child pornography. Just what was available on the computer. I don't know. That's
I'm sorry, was it child pornography?
no, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yeah, your victim was a child.
Yes, ma'am.
And then what about the situation when you were accused of molestation by your daughter, and your wife agreed not to notify law enforcement if you stopped drinking? So let's talk about the situation where your daughter was alleged to have been the victim.
Was that her being the victim?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I'm just having trouble here.
Okay. Do you recall an incident when you were accused of molesting your daughter?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall your wife agreeing not to report it to law enforcement if you stopped drinking?
Yes, ma'am.
And my question to you is, what was the incident involving your daughter? What happened to your daughter?
Yes, ma'am. Trying to think back, I was drinking. And, he happened on the couch. And, she masturbated me.
She did what?
She masturbated me,
At whose request?
mine.
And how old was she?
Nine or 10 at the time. I'm trying to think back.
And how many daughters do you have?
There were 2 daughters.
And which daughter was the victim?
You were Tammy.
Okay. So the person who's on the call today is the victim of that incident. Is that correct, Tammy?
Yes, ma'am. As far as I remember, yes, ma'am.
Well, again, it concerns me that in 2 instances you sexually abused children, and yet you claim that the pornography on your computer was not child pornography.
No, ma'am, it wasn't.
Well, again, that's kind of hard to believe.
I understand, ma'am.
So tell me how it might affect Brittany if the parole board allowed you out of jail early. What impact do you think that might have on her?
I don't know, because I'm just being straightforward. I'm not going to try to contact them. I'm not going to try to write them. I just want to get out of state and go be with my brother. I'm not.
Well, how do you think it would make her feel if you were released early? You said you took victim awareness.
Yes, ma'am.
So how do you think she would feel if you were rewarded with an early release in light of what you did to her? How do you think that would make her feel?
It would probably make her feel nervous. Maybe if I try to get a hold of her, make her feel uncomfortable, scared.
What if you didn't try to get a hold of her, or I'll say in contact with her?
I really don't know. I don't know.
All right, well, Mr. Turk, as I said, on paper, you look like a good candidate for release. But when I dig a little deeper and I see that you're minimizing not only what happened to Brittany, but what happened to your daughter, your lack of honesty in respect to how you answer some of the questions, I have serious concerns, and I just want you to understand that. All right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, that's all I have.
Mr. Wise? Mr. Wise?
Yes, sir, Mr. O'Shea.
Can we hear from Warden Goodwin, please?
Yes, sir. Warden Goodwin, anything you'd like to say on his behalf?
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Roche, Mr. White, I really don't have anything to add. Offender Turk's record, institutional record speaks for itself. He has a really good institutional record. He's been involved in programming. He's done well at the institution. I understand the heinous nature of his crimes and the issues with the victim. So my statement will be that his record speaks for itself and the nature of the crime speaks for itself.
Okay. At this time, Ms. Brittany, would you like to speak? Unmute your
Yes,
mic.
sir.
Okay, and whatever you say, speak directly to the board here, okay?
Yes, sir. So I did prepare something ahead of time, so I'm just gonna read it off. My name is Brittany Michelle McClelland. I was born November 1999 to Tammy Diane Woodruff and William Michael McClelland. At the time of my birth, my parents weren't married, and when I was 7 months, my godfather walked me down the aisle to stand beside my parents as they were joined together under the eyes of God and man. I've parents who have been by my side and done their best for me since I was born. Through the Erickson stages of development, I found trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, and identity. In terms for someone who has not studied it or has not heard of it for a long time, my parents have imparted to me hope, will, purpose, competency, and fidelity. Overall, I've always had a good family around me. My aunts, my uncles, most of my grandparents, my cousins. They've taught me to be someone who takes no disrespect, who cares for what I have, and who examines and reflects upon my actions and the actions of those around me. They have all taught me to be a forgiving person, that second chances are possible. There is no forgiveness in my heart for Stan Turk, and I will tell you why. The mind is a strange place. It protects us as much as it can, despite how much outside influences affect it. Even as a 21-year-old woman, I still find myself discovering new memories I buried or never thought too much about. Things that my young mind, who held so much trust for someone, had never realized was wrong at the time. The damage is extensive and likely irreparable in some instances. It started small, as all terrible misdeeds do, with altering my comfort level around him. As young children, our grandparents loved to sweep us up in their laps and hold us while we watched TV or played games or simply sat there before we understood how to play or communicate with others. There's a certain space we all allow ourselves to touch small children when they're in our laps. Even in moments when they're tipping over and about to fall, adults don't place their hands higher than above mid-thigh on a child, either their legs or their belly. It's subconscious, something we don't truly think of or realize until someone brings it to our attention. That unspoken and unconscious rule did not apply when he swept me into his lap. So yes, that is how it started, and it got worse over the years. Touching me inappropriately, having me touch him inappropriately. I'll spare the details of those. Any questions you have could be asked to my face, and I will answer them honestly. Child molestation or any child abuse of any kind are not things people like to know the details about, and I don't blame you for that. It's an unbearable sort of knowledge. Though this hearing today will likely require you to hear about some of it, have no fear of hearing it from me in my own words. Those actions are not what I still irrevocable rage about. It was the summer between my 5th and 6th grade year that I told. I was at camp and away for a while. By this point in life, I had a little cousin who was a girl and a sister who were born in the same year. The abuse had been going on for some time, and I knew before that point that it was wrong. In a warped sense of protection over him, I did not tell anyone. Time and distance away from him gave me clarity, and it allowed me to see who was next in the line of fire if he lost interest in me. I was 11 years old, and I was forced to choose between a man who was supposed to be my grandfather and my little ones. I will never forgive him for that. It's sort of funny, but it isn't. A lot of times you can tell something goes wrong in a child's life when they act out. Their grades drop, there are behavioral issues. It usually straightens out once the stressor is gone. My grades were perfect through the abuse because of how normalized it was in my life. I brought home my first 2 C's my 7th grade year. Science and social studies, 2 classes I normally excelled in. To this day, I doubt my teacher knows that I wasn't rebelling against her for so many projects and homework. I was rebelling against everyone else for the change that telling the secret that brought to my life. The change that shouldn't have happened because what he did shouldn't have happened. I will never forgive him for that. My grandmother and my mother's relationship went downhill after everything came out. I could see my Nana struggles with it even as a child. She loved him. I don't hate her for that. She couldn't see the future, and I can't imagine the war it waged in her own head. The him that she knew and the him that committed vile crimes in the home they created. She opened a letter from him one time in front of me. She cried reading those words, and I saw what true heartbreak was for the first time. A heartbreak she couldn't hide from me or from anyone else if she tried. In the end, I think that heartbreak killed her and took my grandmother away. I will never forgive him for that. Growing up, I was in the same class with people every year. My social life revolved around the same 30 people every single day for most of my formative years. None of them knew the truth, and they still lived their lives without that knowledge. Despite them being my only friends and the people I knew, I didn't want to stay in Natchitoches, and an opportunity for us to leave came up. When I got to my new school, I realized just how little I trusted people I didn't know, and how long it took to begin to trust them. I can't even count the relationships I ran from, friendly or otherwise. Because someone I trusted so much betrayed me before I knew what betrayal was, I missed out on so many opportunities and experiences. I will never forgive him for that. I didn't realize how desensitized I became to my own abuse until my roommate said something. We were having a wine and movie night and discussing our childhoods. She moved around a lot and she has seen more of the world than I have. Before we began the mandatory, well, I'm drunk and it's 2 a.m., let's talk about aliens and conspiracy theories conversation, she asked about it. My roommate is also my best friend, so she knew a little. And in answering her questions, she questioned how I was so casual about it. I shrugged. She used the word desensitized, and I realized just how true it rang out. I will not ever forgive him for that. I'm sure there are people out there who believe him and call me a liar, but they can come to me when they reach 18 years old and hear that it takes 7 years for all skin cells to die and be replaced by new ones, and they finally have a body that wasn't touched by their abuser. They can speak to me when they have a dissociative episode because they taught themselves not to feel anxiety and in the process not feel anything else. And their words will be taken into consideration when they realize that their sense of love was warped by someone they trusted. And they'll only hurt me when anxiety attacks wake them up from their sleep and they hide it to seem unaffected. And no, I will never forgive him for any of that. The things he did have done to others, I know that. Some people never recover. Drugs, suicide attempts, a mass index of mental health concerns and disorders despite the thousands of therapy sessions. I came out stronger than that. I came out burning with what I felt and able to withstand the flame. My love of fictional characters has set a bar for men they can never hope to achieve, sure, but that was because I didn't know if men in love can be kind. It was easier to lose myself in the imaginations of, usually female, writers and pretend that there were people like that. There was hope for me to find a man who would treat me like that, who would show and prove and say that my worth is more than $20 per incident, because he clearly didn't think so. Those characters in my family got me here. Something happens, I have a bad day, I call mom and sit down with one of my books or a TV show. My dad sends me YouTube videos he probably wanted to sit down with me to watch. My sister loves me unconditionally and helps me out beneath mom and dad's nose if I get a ticket. They find out later, but I don't get in trouble for it. I'm in nursing school now, one of the hardest professions in the world, one where many don't make it. It has caused me stress, it has caused me grief, and I've seen the exact nurse I want to be and the exact one I don't want to be. He gave me a mirror and broke it. I made tools from those pieces as I put them back together to show someone I recognized. But I'm not done yet. And when he leaves that cell to never walk back in again, I will be in a place far happier than he'd ever believe was possible for me. Should the parole board deem him unfit for release, I will be happy. I'll have more time to get there, to carve the place in the world I want for me and mine, for my parents, for my sister, for the friends who backed me up in everything with everyone and became my family. I will never be a woman who never went through what he did to me. Those cracks will always be there. That distrust, that vague sense of paranoia, that anger and hatred. I wasn't born that way. He made me that way. But I will be so much more than my past, even as I miss that little girl who never grew up to be her truest self. I'm sure he'll miss her too. She was much easier to kill. In the eyes of whatever God he believes in, he needs to admit he did it. I suffered in silence for years, gaslit by him.
Okay, thank you very much, Brittany. At this time, we're going to speed it up a little bit. Miss Tammy, will you go ahead and do it? We was a little long on that one, so go ahead and try to do your statement.
Hi, I'm Tammy. I am Brittany's mom, and Stan was married to my mother. The first thing I want to say is the incident he spoke about with me. I have suppressed memories, so it's the first time I know of that. But as far as my daughter goes, I want to ask you to deny him parole for 4 reasons. He was a trusted member of our family. If he could hide his misdoings from 2 previous victims of sexual abuse, what could he do to someone else's kid when released? Number 2, to my knowledge, the only times he has admitted any wrongdoing was when he failed his polygraph and admitted to 6 occasions of abuse and when he accepted his plea. Number 3, my daughter is still healing. I went into this plea that if he was in prison until she was out of college, she would at least get the experience of high school and college without looking over her shoulder. She has had time to heal, learn, and live. She's not out of college yet. She's still learning and healing. And number 4, this one's probably most important to me. Brittany will live a lifetime with her abuse. And I don't think that 10 years in jail is enough. Why should she live in a jail for the rest of her life because of what he did? But he doesn't have to live in a jail of the corrections department for the rest of his. I know what my plea was. I did what my husband and I did what we did for our daughter. But I ask you to please keep him incarcerated, to give her more time to establish her life and to heal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tammy. At this time, the board will be voting. We're going to be starting, Ms. Stark, if you would. Anything you'd like to say to the board before we vote?
Mr. Wise? Mr. Wise?
Yes.
I think we have somebody from the Victims Department in Natchitoches that would like to say something.
I don't see them on the speaking list. They're not on the speaking list.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Stark, if you would, Stanley, if you would, go ahead and give your statement.
Hello, state. I committed a crime that I regret it happened because it shouldn't have never happened. Or the victim's family, like I said, they trusted me with their daughter and I broke that trust. And as far as the victim, she should have been safe with me and she wasn't, and I regret that. And I've tried to move on with my life the best I can to whenever I will be released, that I will be a better part of society. And I hope one day everything will be okay.
All right, Mr. Stark. At this time, Mr. Alvin Roche will be voting.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to address Tammy McClendon. You should be very, very proud of your daughter. You should be very proud of your daughter. And I'm sorry some of the information that we had to cover in this hearing was necessary, because I don't think Mr. Turk had fully accepted responsibility. And I don't think he accepted in what he did. And he's shown little or no remorse up until now. I think it finally dawned on him in the last 30 minutes that he is responsible for damaging a young lady's life, and she has come out of it with flying colors. So I want to apologize for the information that was covered, but it was necessary. Mr. Turk.
Yes, sir.
Based on express opposition from the victim's mother, who is your stepdaughter, the victim is still, I think, emotionally, mentally, and physically affected by the offense, and I think she'll be affected a long time. But I want to give her a chance to complete her education, establish relationships, and start a career as a registered nurse without fear of you being released. You have opposition from the judge in the jurisdiction in which you committed the crime. You have opposition from the DA's office. You have opposition from the chief of police of Natchitoches, Louisiana. And you have an opposition from the sheriff's office in Natchitoches Parish. Based on all the express opposition I've just articulated, my vote is to deny your request.
Ms. Bonnie Jackson.
All right, Mr. Turk, likewise, my vote today is to deny, based on strong victim opposition, the court's opposition, the fact that this sentence was part of a plea agreement, and the fact that you failed to take full responsibility for your actions. So for those reasons, my vote today is to deny your request for early release.
At this time, I'm going to be voting. My vote is to deny a very, very strong law enforcement opposition to this release. Also strong victims opposition to this release. Stanley, get in there and keep working and write back when you see fit. Today's vote was to deny your parole. Thank you very much. The time is 10:38 a.m. I want to thank you, Mr. Goodwin, for everything over there.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
I'm going to keep this short so that we can just come back to the present day, to October of 2024, and watch his next parole hearing, and then I'll kind of do my unpacking. Now, we don't have court documents for this. We don't have appeals, so it's really just going to be, me doing a Mandu rant. But 30 seconds of some Randy ranting right now. It's again the Jim Wise. Oh my God, how dare you? How dare you? She already finished talking. It's not like you didn't say, hey, can you speed up and finish? No. Instead, he has to actually say that went too long. That statement went too long. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And he was the longest serving board member in the history. Somehow he made it through both sides of the aisle, through both, Democrat and Republican governors, both handpicked him to be there. Why? Anyways. And then he doesn't allow, because it's not listed on the registry, the victim advocate with the DA's office to add insult to injury. Can you imagine? Can you even imagine how soulless you have to be to say, well, no, not in writing, but don't worry, they come back for this hearing to make up for lost time. And do you think he learned anything? Do you think that anything, progressed through these hearings? Who else misses Miss Jackson and Mr. O'Shea? Oh, they are just Louisiana's national treasure, in my opinion. And we're going to get some corrections to the record too from the survivors on this, which is needed. So anyways, let's jump in, and I'll also unpack what the low risk score is. Miss Stapleton touches on that in a little bit, and if you haven't seen it, it might blow your mind. Thank you, Sir Richard, for tying these hearings together. If you like seeing the hearings where we come back and do the multiple hearings, there's a playlist for it. It's called the Return of Playlist. It's full of hearings like this where we have back-to-back continuations or revocations. With that, let's jump in.
So, Mr. Turk, you're classified as a second felony offender. You're currently serving a 15-year sentence. You were sentenced indecent behavior with a juvenile in March of 2012. You had a parole eligibility date, which is in March of 2022. You don't earn good time, so your full-term date is March 23rd, 2027. Does all that sound correct to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, take a moment, sir, and tell us why you believe we should grant you parole today. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I've been incarcerated for 13 years. I did commit a crime, and it was a family member. And I knew since I've been in here, I needed to educate myself on what I did and understand it more. I took the self-help programs, and the main one I took was for sex offenders. And I finished all 4 phases, and I became a facilitator because I knew it would help me understand more of what I did and what I need to do to better myself. And took more self-help programs too. 'Cause the more help I get in here, the better off I'll be whenever I am growed out.
Great, well, thank you, sir. Warden Dozat, is there anything you can add?
Stanley has not had any rule violations since he's been here at David Wade. So he's not a disciplinary issue. He is currently in reentry and has a good evaluation from his work supervisor. He does plan, as far as his residence plan, to move to Panama City, Florida, which we have not received any kind of verification of approval for the interstate compact. So that would be pending, and plans to draw his previous retirement, retirement check from his previous job.
Thank you for that information. We'd like to hear from those who want to speak in opposition. And Ms. Alice, I'm going to let you, I don't know if Ms. McClellan, is she there with you? Yeah, y'all are still on mute. So Ms. McClellan, go ahead and tell us what you'd like us to know.
Hi, my name is Tammy. I am Brittany's mom, the victim in this case. Stan was married to my mom for most of my juvenile and adult life up until my mother's passing in 2013. Stan was considered to be a member of our family. My daughter called him Pawpaw. He took my daughter. The abuse began while my husband was fighting cancer. So I have a husband who's fighting to stay with his daughter, and I have my mom's husband who is abusing my daughter, taking away her innocence, her trust, her faith in people. Brittany told, because she was scared that he would, since she was out of town for a month, that he would abuse her little sister or her little cousin. And that was something she couldn't deal with. Time goes on. Stan is convicted. He takes a plea bargain that we agreed to. My understanding at the time was that he was going to make my daughter take the stand. And my daughter was not strong enough for that. She had already had this horrific event happen from the age of 5 to the age of 12. Think about it, that's her whole childhood. When most kids are playing ball and laughing and having fun and learning to be a person, this person who's supposed to be a grandfather is abusing her. She took a class at her Catholic school that she was attending, and that's how she figured out what was wrong. Protecting God's children. I will forever be grateful to the Catholic Church for that, because my daughter figured out that this grandfather was hurting her, and he was wrong, but he made her believe it was her fault. She caused this. Can't tell us how, but she did. He goes away. Brittany starts getting her confidence back. I have a 24-year-old daughter who dedicates her life to helping other people. She is a nurse. She is fulfilling that dream. Her dream was also to go back to school in August. We had to put that on hold because this came up. So once again, this person is disrupting her life. My daughter's 24 years old. She's never had a boyfriend. She's never had any type of romantic relationship. And why? Because one selfish person took that away from her, shattered her trust, shattered her self-worth, her self-belief. We have given her the best support system we have. My entire family, my husband's family, we have gathered around her and we have done everything we can, but she isn't a part of her recovery, that it is on her now. It's her internal. When I had to tell her that I got the call that he was up for parole again, I had to watch that light, me, come out of my daughter's eyes. I had to see that fear come back. I know we can't stay in jail forever.
Kathy Anderson.
But my daughter has a lifetime sentence dealing with the abuse he put on her. My youngest daughter has a lifetime of watching her sister struggle to be the woman she was meant to be. Brittany was so loving. She loved to hug you and give you kisses and saw nothing but the good in life. Post Brittany, that little girl doesn't exist anymore because of him. He took that. He took it from her. He took it from me, my husband, my other daughter. I don't want him to get out. In his last parole hearing, he said that he made his daughter him off. Guess what? It wasn't me. He can't even remember who his victims are. I can tell you what I do remember, thanks to suppressed memories, and my brother had to confirm it for me. I woke up. I was sleeping in the living room. I woke up to something wet on my toes. I kicked. I didn't know what it was. It was him sucking on my toes. I didn't know what that was. I didn't understand it, so I had to ask my mom. I never knew there was such a thing as a foot fetish. It's just because he was drunk. I look like my mom. My daughter didn't. Did he do that to my daughter? I don't know. He can't remember how many victims he actually has in this world. I know my daughter is one. And I am begging you to give her the extra time. Make him stay into his max out date. Give her that to continue to heal. I believe she deserves it. I believe she deserves to get that next degree. She deserves to be able to work more, to maybe one day have a boyfriend. Her biggest dream is to be a mom. And at 24, she knows that she may never get to have that dream because the thought of letting someone touch her that way sends her into panic mode, shuts her down. In his last parole hearing, when he heard of Brittany's accomplishments, he was so proud. That's what he did. You don't have that right anymore. You lost that right. The day you touched what was mine, you lost that right.
Ms. McClellan, can you speak to us and not him? And we need you to wrap it up for us, please.
When he heard my daughter's voice, I could see the love or the infatuation, the obsession he has with my kid. I'm asking you for her. I've proven I don't care about myself. For her, give her the time she needs. Let him max out, and maybe we can protect some other children. And another mom's not sitting before some other judge doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hardison, is there anything you wanted to add?
Mr. Harrington, the district attorney, is here. He would like to speak.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for being.
Good morning, members of the board. There's nothing I can say that is more powerful than what you just heard. But this defendant has caused this family a lifetime of pain and loss. And if I'm not mistaken, his full term date is in 2027. That really ends up being too soon. But if there's ever a case where a defendant should be denied parole, this is one. And this office strongly opposes this defendant's parole. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us. We appreciate it. All right, Mr. Turk, would you answer Mrs. Stapleton's questions, please?
Okay, well, Mr. Turk, I know that Tammy's not allowed to speak directly to you, but you did hear everything she had to say. And everything she said was gonna be the things, questions that I was gonna ask for you. I'm not gonna double down on that, because she's already covered. So many, well, the important things. She talked about her daughter and what you stole from her, and those are gonna be most of the times we don't have the victims here. Victim's voice is very important to be a part of this procedure. So I'm very glad, Tammy, that you were able to come here on behalf of your daughter. I can tell you, as a victim's advocate, when I would go to court with victims and it would be a rape case, it was not unusual for the victim to say what they had to say. And then as we'd be walking out the doors, they'd say, okay, that's it. I'll never talk about this again, because I don't want to hear that person's name, and I don't want to say it again. So I do understand that this totally disrupts the peace that they finally find in life to have to go through something like this. And Brittany sounds like a wonderful young lady, and I hope that she will continue on the path that she's at. I imagine she's still in counseling. I do want to say, we do have crime victims reparations, and the district attorney knows about that. So you have that, and then you have an organization called STAR, which is a very good organization for sexual assault survivors, which Brittany is, and those are two organizations that you may want to check in. So back to you, Mr. Turk. What I wanted to ask you is that when they did an assessment on you, and it was a sexual assault assessment, you still denied that you did anything wrong. That's so I wanted to ask you about that. You didn't find that you did anything wrong. Is that correct?
That I did do anything wrong?
You deny
Yeah.
doing anything.
You denied that you did anything wrong?
No, ma'am, I did something wrong, very wrong.
Yeah, because it said because you touched on top of her clothes that.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see, it says, this is on the child sex predator assessment panel at the very end in 2024. When discussing the crime, he admitted acting inappropriately with the child by rubbing the hands or the genitals above her pants on one occasion. He denies any of the other wrongdoings. The incidents that took place when the victim was 11 years old and he was 55. So you're saying that it was just one time, victim saying more than one time. And you're still saying that it only happened once?
One time, yes, ma'am.
Okay. You got a -2 on the static score. That's something people look at. You have strong opposition, obviously from the DA, you just spoke, from the judge and the chief of police, and definitely from the victims. And like I said, there's really nothing more I can say. Her mother, thank goodness, is her advocate today. She spoke up for her daughter. And I don't have anything else to say.
Mhm. All right. Is there anything you want to say to wrap it up before we vote, Mr. Turk?
Yes, ma'am. I truly regret all the pain and suffering that I caused, not only the victim, but the victim's family too. I can't take back what I did. I'm sorry it ever happened, and I understand where the mother's coming from.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate those remarks. I think we are prepared to vote. Mrs. Stapleton?
Okay, at this time, Mr. Turk, I'm gonna vote to deny. And strong victim opposition, strong law enforcement opposition, and that's my reason.
Mr. Byron?
I concur for the same reasons.
And Mr. Turk, I do, based on the opposition that's been expressed here today and in the record, my vote today is to deny. You do have an outdate in the not too distant future, so use your time well there so you can prepare for that date. Good luck to you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
And let that sink in. he does have an out date sometime soon. He has an out date. He's getting out in just 3 years. 3 years, he's going to be walking the street. He's going to be doing whatever it is that he wants to do. He'll be 70 years old. That's quite young. I should say 70 years young. You know, it's interesting, and we'll go through that static 99 risk score. It is quite amazing how, like, I think both Miss Jackson and then in there at the end, how Miss Stapleton, the new victims advocate, she took over for Mr. O'Shea, replaced, the governor removed the new governor came in, removed the old board and handpicked, but she's a good choice. She didn't even say you have a low risk score. I feel like she's disgusted by it like we are. She said the score said you have -2 points. She didn't use the word you have a low risk score. And we'll go over what -2 points is, by the way. And if you haven't seen it, it might just put you over the edge. So don't throw anything. But did you pick up on, was it Miss Jackson that called it out? In his 2021 hearing, a few months before the hearing, he had an assessment. And he said the same exact thing that he said in his assessment before this hearing in 2024, that it happened one time and it was above clothing. This is a roach that went through all 4 phases of the programs, that changes him and is going to cure him of his mental, of his fascination with little ones. And all these years later, he still says that. Can you imagine he's facilitating these programs? You can't make this stuff up. I'm a little bit like at a loss of words of where to even start with this. I don't for one second believe, he's the kind of guy I believe fully. He puts himself in the situation to give himself access to pray, and he's just been doing that, just praying on. And since the age of 4 or 5 to 12, and think about this survivor who then had to make the decision. She's away, and she realized, it dawned on her at the young age of 12, oh my God, I'm away from him, and he might have access to my younger, I think, sister or niece or cousin, I forget. He's going to have access, so I need to go. I need to say, she didn't do it even for her. She did it to save her loved ones from him. I mean, just to take that in. And you heard, and she got her nursing degree, which is so good to hear, And she does have her mother, as Miss Stapleton said, fighting for her. Oh. So, and the DA showed up. The DA showed up before, the DA, like, advocate showed up, worked for the DA's office, but the DA actually came here to speak. And I don't know why Ms. Renazza felt it was necessary to say wrap it up in such a really a short hearing, but there you have it. So let's go over this risk score because it's insane. I do feel like this is one the kind of the hearings that I'm going to want to come back to and talk more about. We saw so much. We saw Mr. O'Shea classic, how Mr. O'Shea put him on the spot there and said, this is an official hearing. You can't lie. I think we've only seen Mr. O'Shea do that one other time. And then he went out and just like so skillfully, he got him to lie, he got him to admit and prove that he was lying. And it was like, oh my gosh, if only they could have like added more time for that, for perjury, right? But I don't know, that's not something that they did. But man, I do miss the Mr. O'Shea and the Miss Bonnie Jackson of getting in there. And I do not miss Jim Wise at all. It was like Miss Renazza kind of pulled a Jim Wise. Couldn't help herself. Wrap it up. Really? Okay. So this is the static 99 that they both refer to. And was it Miss Jackson called it out where she said, you know, if you could lie on the form and get a low risk score, which is what he did. And then Miss Stapleton didn't even say low risk score. She said you got a -2. Now this is how you get a -2. And let me tell you, this static 99, it is a statewide collaborative form. What that means is that all 50 states in the United States of America that can't agree on anything all agreed on this. This form was made in 2000. I think Richard said it was updated in 2010. An inmate fills it out, and that determines their score. And they can lie on the score. No one's fact checking them. Much of this stuff can't be fact checked. Maybe if it's in the record, it would be fact checked, but that's it. Most of the stuff is not in an official record. So it starts with this. What's your age? Because he's older than 60, he starts off with -3 points. The purpose of this is to have as few points as possible. If you can end with a negative, with just 1 point, you're considered a low risk. So right off the bat, because he's 60 or older, he's a -3. Now, of course, all of us without PhDs don't understand, we don't understand that this moment you turn 60, you all of a sudden aren't into little ones. Your brain, it rewires itself. We don't understand that. So we shouldn't get upset at this test. But all 50 states, they understand that. Now, have you ever lived with a lover for at least 2 years? So if the answer is yes, it's 0 points. Because again, we all know that no one who does this to children likes to marry people, have relationships to gain access to the prey. That's not a thing. We don't, Now, index, non-sexual violent convictions, any convictions. This could be like CP. So no. Now we know that he had stuff on his computer that he had to delete, but that was never on the record. And I'm not going to bring up all of that stuff. That's just like the stuff that his wife knew. I'm just not going to bring that up. It was addressed in the hearings. It's too complex for me with the victims. So a prior non-sexual violence, any convictions. Non-sexual violence, any convictions. So it's possible that no, he doesn't have violence. Now, I don't know if his DUI shows up in this or not, but even if it does, that could be why he has the -2 instead of -3. But let's keep going. Prior sex offenses, no. So he's still at -3 or 2. Prior sentencing dates, yeah, I don't really understand. It was just redundant. Any convictions for non-contact, so that could be against CP or something, or solicitation, but the answer is no. Any unrelated victims, no. For some reason, if you say yes, you get a point. If you say no, you don't. And then this is not related, unrelated. Okay. So like apparently if it's related, you're less of a risk. But if it's not related, you're more of a risk. That makes a lot of sense. Any stranger victims? No, because this was his step-grandchild, right? Any male victims? Obviously, we know anyone who has a male victim is a higher risk, of course. And anyone who doesn't, no. So it could be that he's a -2 instead of a -3 because of that, a prior arrest for DUI. And at that low risk, they believe that he has a 0.7% to 2% chance of ever doing this again. It doesn't take a PhD or a judge or a jury or a legislator or whatever to know that this thing is completely nuts. Yet this form that we just read is being used by all 50 states. It was used to give this cockroach a low risk score. It takes one conversation with him when he is sitting here positioned, it's in his best interest to even lie for a parole hearing. This is his second parole hearing. He knows what he needs to say, and still he can't even help himself. And he is considered a low risk scorer. Someone who is doing this to his own children. Someone who's crawling around the house and sucking on children's toes. Someone who is, you can't make it up. A low risk score. It started at the age of 4 and went to the age of 12. And he is a low chance. He is a low risk. And all 50 states in our great country is using this collaborative algorithmic 10-point questionnaire of nuts. I'm sorry, this stuff pisses me off because it's so clearly insane. I don't know if we can like get one of those petitions or something that can make this feels like it to me. It feels like everybody except for maybe the 0.1% of the crazies that seem to somehow control things would look at this and say, stop it. Heads should roll. And to think that it's been going on for 20 years, that this piece of paper is being relied on, I can't get over the insanity of it. I just can't. And I don't think anyone watching can either. And if you feel good about this 10-point questionnaire, look in the mirror. Maybe you have a PhD. Maybe you're a judge. Maybe you're a 0.1%er. If you do, check those boxes. Maybe you can do some reflection and ask yourself why you're okay with this 10-point questionnaire. Now, I digress. I've gotten off subject. We saw a parole hearing. We saw the insanity of it. We saw a mother standing up for her daughter. We saw a daughter that is being a survivor. We saw board members that shined. We saw board members that, frankly, disturbing. Probably they like the 10-point questionnaire. We saw the DA. We saw it all. And all of it, when it's all said and done, it won't make a difference because in 2027, he will be out. Thank you, Sir Richard, for tying these hearings together. If you'd like to see the back-to-back return of hearings, there's a playlist for that. And with that, I'll let you go.
I will never be a woman who never went through what he did to me. Those cracks will always be there. That distrust, that vague sense of paranoia, that anger and hatred. I wasn't born that way. He made me that way. But I will be so much more than my past, even as I miss that little girl who never grew up to be her truest self. I'm sure he'll miss her too. She was much easier to kill.